There are many humorous things in the world, among them the white man's notion that he is less savage than the other savages. In this quote, he clearly stated the division between the white man versus people of color. His writings provided both valuable insight into life during the 18 and 1900s, but also showed how people are all the same regardless of color or social standing. He used humor and a folksy style to make his writings relatable, which made him a popular author whose works have been widely read. Mark Twain was an important figure in literature due to his writings, because he shed light on tough issues like the difficulty of slavery, the wealth divide, and psychological issues. Even though his writings depict a long ago era, the ideas he shared with readers still ring true today. Mark Twain was born November 30th, 1835 in Florida, Missouri, to John Marshall Clemens and Jane Lambton, and was the sixth child of 7. When Sam was around 4, his father decided it would be a better business decision to move to Hannibal, Missouri. Twain explained his time as a child in Hannibal as a time which consisted of fishing, swimming, and playing pranks in the small town. They had always struggled financially, especially when his father died when Twain was only 12 years old from pneumonia in the year 1847. Because of his father's death, this left Sam at age 12 to help support his family. The first job Twain had ever had was in a bookstore, but he did not like it because it was all busy work. The second job he had was in a blacksmith shop. Then he became a part-time printer's devil at the Hannibal Gazette. After that, he became a typesetter for his older brother Orion in his shop. He got his boater's license and became a steamboat pilot and was a steamboat driver from 1858 to 1865 and made pretty good money until the Civil War, where the business was too hard to continue. His name, most people know him by, Mark Twain, actually came from a boat term which marks the minimum safe depth a steamboat can travel, which is 12 feet. After piloting a steamboat for 3 years, he and his brother Orion headed to Nevada to try and mine for silver and gold. Not being successful, he returned to journalism. Clemens met his wife, Olivia Langdon, and married in 1870 and had 4 children, 1 son who died at 2 years old from heart failure, and 3 girls, Susie, Clara, and Jean. Even though Mark Twain joined the Confederate forces during the Civil War for a brief moment serving as second lieutenant for only 2 weeks after failing to mine in Nevada, afterwards he still served as an influential person to the abolition of slavery. In the story, a true story repeated word for word as I heard it, Twain wrote about the terror of families who were forced into slavery, being separated and sold. This short was told by Aunt Rachel, who was Twain's family servant. This story begins introducing Aunt Rachel, a 60-year-old colored servant who is described as a cheerful, hearty soul.
They put chains on us and put us on a stand as high as this porch, 20 foot high, and all the people stood around, crowds and crowds, and they'd come up there and look us all around and squeeze our arm and make us get up and walk, and then say, "This one too old, this one lame, this one don't mount to much." And they sold my old man and took him away. They began to sell my children and take them away. And I began to cry. The man said, "Shut up, you damn blubber," and he hit me on the mouth with his hand. When the last one was gone but my little Henry, I grabbed him close up to my breast so, and I rise up and I says, "You shan't take him away," I says. "I'll kill the man that touches him," I says. But my little Henry whispered and say, "I'm going to run away, and then I'll work and buy you freedom." Oh, bless the child, he always so good. But they got it. They got it. The men did. But I took and teared the clothes most off of 'em and beat 'em over the head with my chain, and they give it to me too, but I didn't mind that.
In Huckleberry Finn, Twain wrote about slavery by exposing how bad it was. He did it in multiple ways, such as Huck and Jim's relationship in general. He also showed how bad slavery really was by making characters in the book, such as Miss Watson, who seem really nice and well-grounded, and an all-around a good person. But on the other hand, they show no emotion or remorse toward Jim being enslaved, and separated from his family, which shows society at the time. Not only did Twain talk about blacks, he also talked about people of different races and backgrounds, such as this quote: I have seen Chinamen abused and maltreated in all the mean, cowardly ways possible to the invention of a degraded nature, but I never saw a Chinaman righted in a court of justice for wrongs thus done to him. Now, in this next quote, you will really see how Twain thinks. You will see how he thinks all people should be equal and how everyone is really all the same on the inside.
Emperors, kings, artisans, big people, little people. We're all alike on the inside, and when our clothes are off, nobody can tell which of us is which.
Being rich ain't what it's cracked up to be. It's just worry and sweat, and a wishing you was dead all the time. This quote Mark Twain stated in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and it means that being rich is not as great as people expect it to be. In this quote, Twain tries to break the division between the poor and the wealthy. Through his writing, specifically in Huckleberry Finn, he expresses making something out of nothing. This means that something like a muddy river can turn into something entertaining and meaningful. It is good to begin life poor. It is good to begin life rich. These are wholesome, but to begin it poor and prospectively rich. The man who has not experienced it cannot imagine the curse of it. This was said in an autobiography of Mark Twain, and I think it really shows his view that you do not need to be rich to be successful, and you do not need to be rich to have a good, happy life. In the books, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, both characters can be seen with antisocial habits, which in the stories include stealing, lying, and running away. In the book, Tom Sawyer is raised singly by his Aunt Polly because his mother died. Tom's actions in the book can be understood because of the situation he was dealt. This is because not only is his mom dead, his Aunt Polly feels so bad for Tom that she does not discipline him. In a quote from Aunt Polly from the book, it says, "He's my own dead sister's boy. Poor thing. And I ain't got the heart to lash him somehow." Psychology professionals think Tom has conduct disorder. In numerous stories and books, Twain also writes about the happenings of mental illness. But when I think of a story depicting the trauma of a slave, my mind goes to a true story repeated word for word as I heard it. The slave is clearly scarred as anyone would be, and you can really see the emotion through her voice and how she responds to the interviewer, who is Mark Twain as a young boy. In The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Twain shows a traumatized child who went through child abuse and abandonment from his father, who is the town drunk and often leaves him to fend for himself. And from a quote in the book, it says, "Yes, he's got a father, but you can't never find him these days. He used to lay drunk with the hogs in the tan yard, but he hain't been seen in these parts for a year or more." In the book, Twain wrote about feelings Huck had throughout the story, such as guilt and empathy. He showed this by writing about Huck, thinking he was doing something morally wrong by helping Jim escape because the owners relied heavily on slave labor. So by helping Jim escape from slavery, he was making someone else's life harder. After reading this book, you will see the ability Huck has to put himself in Jim's shoes, but also showed the difficulty of a white teen choosing which side to be on. I was letting on to give up sin, but away inside of me I was holding on to the biggest one of all. I was trying to make my mouth say I would do the right thing and the clean thing, and go and write to that owner and tell where he was, but deep down I knowed it was a lie, and he knowed it. You can't pray a lie, I found that out. Mark Twain had a big impact on society through his platform, which was through his stories. In these stories, Twain wrote about big issues of the time such as slavery, poverty of people and families, and mental illness. He showed how terrible slavery was by telling stories like a true story repeated word for word as I heard it, where families were being separated from one another to be auctioned off. Mark Twain wrote about the poor with characters like in Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. Huck is described as unwashed and insufficiently fed, which points to poverty, but he depicts him as making do with what he had and having a good life, despite not being rich. He showed that money is not everything, and that having money can actually be a burden too. He described mental illness specifically in Tom Sawyer, where he is singly raised by his Aunt Polly because his mother died at a young age. None of his characters he wrote about had perfect lives, because all of them have had something happen to them through his stories. He talks about abusive parents, lying, stealing, and trauma. His plain way of speaking talked about all of these controversies, bringing them out in the open and exposed to a wide audience. Therefore, he was a very impactful voice in American history. Samuel Longhorn Clemens, the author known to the world as Mark Twain, died on April 21, 1910, after suffering from a heart attack in Redding, Connecticut. Mark Twain is remembered as a person who greatly affected America at the time and is recognized in an award given out every year called the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. This prize is given to people who had an impact on American society like Mark Twain in his writings.